Coming up on Twice the Terror.
By the way, I have to point this out. Spine Tinglers is written by a bunch of people, all credited as M.T. Coffin. I mean, come on. You gotta love the pun of M.T. I can tell by your face you don't love the pun of M.T. Coffin. But
I'll allow it. I don't...
Twice the Terror.
welcome to Twice the Terror. I'm Ryan.
I'm Kat.
And we are your hosts. If you don't know how this show works, typically what we do is we pick a topic, we each bring a little something to talk about with that topic, and each episode is something brand new for your ears to listen to and your eyes to watch if you're on our YouTube channel. And if you're not, youtube.com/@twicetheterror is where you want to find us. But for today's episode, Kat, what are we talking about?
So we had mentioned this series called Bone Chillers when we were, deep in the weeds about our 90s media.
Yep.
And we thought the show was completely forgotten to the universe, and we managed to dig it up through the annals of YouTube.
100%. This is such a weird little niche thing that, like, the only person I've ever talked to who remembers this was you. So
Same.
for anybody who doesn't know or isn't aware, what we're going to do today is we're going to dive a little bit into Bone Chillers, kind of the history of the book series and the TV series. So if anybody wants to watch this episode along with us, you can find it pretty much everywhere. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Internet Archive, Dailymotion, all kinds of places, because it's kind of been forgotten, and it's only 13 episodes of the show. So if you want to check it out, definitely you can do that, kind of follow along with us or watch it afterwards, watch it before, whatever you want. But yeah, we're starting with the first episode, Art Intimidates Life.
Shown in widescreen,
which I loved, and each episode kind of has one of those little slogans at the bottom, which is fun. So what is Bone Chillers for anybody who doesn't know? As we talked about before in our last two episodes, Goosebumps was everywhere in the 90s. Like, that was the thing for, like, scary kid stuff. Like, it was hard to escape Goosebumps. Like, I loved it, you loved it. Like, the show, the books, all that stuff. Like, Goosebumps was fantastic. But what a lot of people kind of forget was during that time period, a bunch of other publishers tried to capitalize on that by starting their own Goosebumps knockoffs.
That's how we got stuff like Spine Tinglers, and I think there's another one called
Dead Time Stories.
Yeah.
And Bone Chillers was one of those. Oddly enough, I think Bone Chillers is kind of one of the more renowned, I guess you would say, of them.
I would say, yeah. I think Bone Chillers honestly was just better. I mean, not to disparage anybody else's writing, but I do think Bone Chillers was genuinely well written, and it's very funny.
Yeah.
In a way.
And it's a weird thing where as I've recollected the original Goosebumps books, I've also been, as I find them, collecting these knockoffs because they're just fun. Like, not only are they just fun in the way Goosebumps is fun, like especially Dead Time Stories and Bone Chillers has like artwork on the cover by Tim Jacobus, who was the guy that did the artwork for Goosebumps. Not all of them, but like a lot of them. So it's that same kind of like flair. And even the like really like if Bone Chillers is like the B-movie knockoff of Goosebumps, like Spine Tinglers is like the like Z-movie knockoff.
Yeah. I think in a way too, when they got the same artist, I think that was their way of tricking people into buying their book. Because you see it, you think it's Goosebumps, you grab it, and you're like, what is coccyx ticklers? Like, I don't know what this is.
Right? Right? There's so many of those types of books out there that like everyone wanted to get in on Goosebumps. And one of them, of course, was Bone Chillers. It was published by HarperCollins, like I said, during the Goosebumps craze. And originally they were written by Betsy Haynes, I believe,
Queen.
Haynes. Now, she is always credited as the creator. Now, on the show, she's credited as the creator of the book series along with a guy named Daniel Weiss, Weiss, which I had to look into because I was like, why is he credited but not credited on the books? He was her publisher. So that's why she gets credit for the books, but like he gets credit for the publishing, therefore he gets credit on the TV show, which is kind of weird. But later on in the series, they started doing it where they'd get other writers to write them. Because not everybody was R.L. Stein, right? Like not everybody could make a book each month. So it would always be like credited as created by Betsy Haynes. This book was written by some other person. Like so, and it's a weird book series because it only has 23 books total. Only less than half of the original Goosebumps.
Pretty small.
It's pretty small, and compared to, I think even Spine Tinglers, which I have a couple of over there. By the way, I have to point this out. Spine Tinglers is written by a bunch of people, all credited as M.T. Coffin. I mean, come on. You gotta love the pun of M.T. I can tell by your face you don't love the pun of M.T. Coffin. But
I'll allow it. I don't... It's not the worst I've heard.
Well, even Dead Time stories. Again, I've done like weird deep dives, and maybe we could talk about some of these other ones down the road because like they're all fascinating on how these publishers like Dead Time stories. I guess within the last like 10 years started republishing them, but under the proper name of, it was originally two sisters who wrote those books. So they would trade off who wrote it. But what they did, I can't remember what the name is, what their actual names are, but their initials, one of them had an A name and one of them had a G name. So to get that R.L. Stein theme, they were credited as A.G. whatever their last name is to make it sound like it was one person writing it when it was really two sisters. But a lot of fascinating stuff. But yeah, only 23 books in this, although apparently there might be a 24th one that was exclusive to France. It was written in French. This series, only 15 of the 23 books were published in French. But there's this weird, mysterious extra book about like a lobster chasing kids on Christmas or something. And it's only in French. And I have...
Okay, mysterious.
I have no idea. That's the most... Okay. This is a really hard book series to find out anything on. I've tried to do research, and there's not a ton of it. No. You can find the first 4 books re-released on Amazon under Betsy Haynes, her...
On Kindle Unlimited, if you're interested.
Yeah, but they don't have the cool cover art.
No, they don't.
So I wonder if she retained the rights to those ones, but not the rest of the series. Because some of these books, man, like I've been looking at them on Thrift Books and Abe Books and all these places. The first like 10 you can get for fairly cheap, but like some of the later ones go for like $80 a pop. Like they're really hard to find.
Wow.
And I have only stumbled upon one. Well, I've been looking at all the half-price books in our area, and it was Franken-Turkey. So I own Franken-Turkey, and I ordered Franken-Turkey too. So I have the Franken-Turkey duo, which, spoiler alert, maybe that'll be our Thanksgiving episode. Who knows? Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I have those ones. But like I've been able to find Spine Tinglers pretty well, a few Dead Time stories, but finding Bone Chillers has been way more difficult for some reason. But as far as Betsy Haynes goes, not a whole lot to know about her. She apparently... I know
she wrote one other series. Like, I don't even know if she wrote one other series, but I did know she wrote a series called The Fabulous Five or something.
It's called The Fabulous Five. It was, I guess, a preteen book series, like aimed at girls, for... Yeah,
kind of like the Babysitter's Club.
Right-ish.
It's sort of vibe.
It sounds like, and I mean, this is no... Betsy, if you're out there, or do you want to talk to a couple of, podcasters doing small podcast on YouTube or whatever, we'd love to talk to you, because I mean this is no disrespect. It sounds like she was a really great go-to author for like, hey, there's this thing that's really popular. Can you do a version of it? Your
No, she
take on
really did have her finger on the pulse. Like
Yeah.
she's a good author. She is extremely creative. I mean, again, like, just watching Bone Chillers and like the stories that are being told and everything, like, these are I actually remember these more than I remember a lot of Goosebumps episodes. And
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, like, I obviously remember a lot of the classics, like the Don't Go Down in the Basement, I think, is the one where the dad is a plant.
Oh,
and
Stay
then,
Out of the Basement?
Yeah, Night of Living Dummy. I remember those episodes very well, but with Bone Chillers, I was like, I had these very visceral memories as a child of watching this show that my dad found at our local library on VHS and being like, there's an episode with a monster turkey. There's an episode where there's a monster on roller skates. There's an episode where the teacher's a giant frog. Like, I remembered these very well.
See, though, that's the weird thing, is I had the same experience, which was, I remember distinctively, my mom used to run, when I was a little kid, she ran a cleaners for my grandmother, but they had set up in this little office space for when my brother and I were young and out of school, because I would have been, I think I was like 6, 7 when the VHSs came out. So when we were young and out of school and she didn't have anybody to watch us or whatever, we would go hang out there. And so we had a TV back there and, like, all kinds of stuff, action figures, all kinds of things. And I distinctively remember renting these VHSs and watching them at that location in our little, like, hangout spot at the cleaners. And it was, I remember specifically the back to school VHS, which was the one with the principal being a frog. And I remember that episode. And for years, I just remembered this. I must have rented the first VHS as well, because watching this episode, there's a moment we'll get to, but it's the moment with the little creature in the pot, where he comes out of the cooking pot and then he's like, he's like, makes this weird little stop motion guy.
Yeah.
I immediately, when I rewatched that scene, it was like back in my brain. I was like, I remember this scene. I remember this scene distinctively because it's so weird. But yeah, I mean, Betsy Haynes, like, she wrote, from what I could find, which was very little, she does have a Wikipedia entry, but it's very thin. And then on top of that, like, you try to find more info on her and there's very little. Apparently she wrote 79 novels. She was born in 1937, so she might be 86 years old, is what they're saying now. Yeah, but there's one photo of her that pops up online, if it is her, and she looks kind of like how my grandmother looked, like kind of like curly perm hair and like big glasses.
She's so cute.
She's and adorable, and it's just like that. Like, I wish we knew more about her. Like,
I really do. Like, Betsy, give us the goods. We want to know.
Yeah, we'd love to know how you came up with this and everything, and what your experience was writing it, and
what
all that stuff.
Inspired you. Like, I have so many questions.
Yeah.
And it's also fun because I love that it's written by someone you wouldn't expect.
Yeah. I mean, R.L. Stein's the same way, right? Like, you look at R.L. Stein, you don't expect him to completely write Goosebumps. Like, he's kind of just like, he looks like a math teacher. Like, he looks,
He does.
Yeah.
No, but he does.
And same thing. Like, and I love that we get these very distinct people writing these, like, memorable, cool books. And apparently, either Bone Chillers was, like, second most popular, or Disney was just looking to get on the Goosebumps craze. Because they developed, for ABC, which we'll get into the episode. There's some weird stuff I can't believe aired on ABC in this episode. But they decided to develop a Bone Chillers show. The show came out in 1996. There were only 13 episodes of it. It basically is only the book series in name. Of the 13 episodes, 3 of them were only based on the books. There is an episode of the show that was later turned into the last book in the series, which is Romeo and Juliet. But other than that, there's only 3, I think, episodes that are based on the books. The rest are all original ideas.
Yeah, so Art Intimidates Life, that one is not a book.
No.
That one is entirely the show.
And then on top of that, too, the other weird thing is it's like they decided to develop it with a reoccurring cast of characters. So unlike Goosebumps, the show, which was basically the books turned into show form as best that they could with their tiny, kids' TV budget, This was like, okay, we're gonna change it. It's now reoccurring characters. Even like books, even episodes that are based on the books are change elements of it to fit what the show was. Right. And I think Goosebumps was credited as created by R.L. Stine, the show, although I don't think he had a whole lot to do with it. This show is not. It's created, quote unquote, and I only use quotes because obviously the book series came first, but created by a guy named Adam Rifkin, who is a name I recognized, and when I did research into it, is also this thing is so weird. So Adam Rifkin sometimes is better known as Riff Coogan, which if you watch this episode, it's credited as written by Adam Rifkin, but directed by Riff Coogan. So he was both the writer and director, but for some reason he directed under a pseudonym. And he did that for a lot of like low budget stuff in the 80s. Like a lot of those like low budget, kind of like Full Moon Features or like things like that. Not quite that company, but...
Oh, Full Moon Features. That's a talk for another day.
We do a whole episode on Full Moon Features, would be fantastic. But he directed movies like The Invisible Maniac, one of those 80s horror comedies with lots of nudity in it and lots of, you know what I mean? Like one of those movies. He directed Psycho Cop 2. He directed, probably the most famous movie I saw that he directed was Detroit Rock City, if you remember that movie.
Yeah, and there is another connection between him and this show. So the guy who plays Carl, the lunch guy, who is absolutely one of my favorite characters in the show. Carl is so funny. He's played by this guy named Miles Dougal, and Miles Dougal was in Detroit Rock City. I was trying so hard to find like who still has a career out of this, or like you know who's still in the business, because I really enjoyed this show and I was really hoping to find more people. And unfortunately, very few people stayed in the business, but he is one of the people who did. And I was like, I love Detroit Rock City. So that's really good to know that the director is the same guy, and that what if... Oh.
And on he's had such a fascinating career. And again, another person I'd like to talk to, just to be like, how did this come about? Like, was he developing a show that they were like, well, we're going to slap Bone Chillers on top of it because it's a name and we're trying to capitalize on Goosebumps? Or was it that they brought the IP to him, and then, you know, I don't know how this worked, because he also, besides directing like a lot of like low budget stuff, he also wrote a lot of movies. He wrote Mouse Hunt, the Nathan Lane movie with like Nathan Lane and Chris Walken and stuff like that, and he wrote Small Soldiers.
What?
So, yeah. The guy that is credited as the creator of the Bone Chillers TV series also wrote Mouse Hunt and Small Soldiers.
Okay, quickly, justice for Betsy Haynes.
Yes, yeah.
But also, I loved Small Soldiers.
Oh, Small Soldiers is great. Like, it is a weird movie that doesn't quite understand its own tone. No. Because it's part, like... I think when Joe Dante directed it, he wanted it to be more satirical and more kind of, like, harder edge. And the company was like, no, but we want to sell toys to kids, so let's soften it. So it's this weird blend of stuff. But what it is still really great. Like, I actually was thinking about Small Soldiers the other day, like... I should rewatch Small Soldiers. Of course, probably the most famous person to come out of this is one of the stars, which is Linda Cardellini.
She was in Scooby-Doo, and... Yeah. What was that show she was in with Christina Applegate?
Let me look it up.
Good show.
Dead to Me.
Dead to Me.
The show was called Dead to Me. So, she, of course, was in Freaks and Geeks. Like you said, she was in Scooby-Doo.
She was in Scooby-Doo.
She was in... she has a small part in the Good Burger movie as the person. Do you remember the Good Burger movie at all? Like, did you?
Yes, but I don't remember seeing her.
So, do you remember the scene where they're thrown into like the mental institution, and there's this girl that helps them escape that Ed like falls in love with? That's Linda Cardellini. She's also the girl that is in the 2 episodes of Boy Meets World where Corey like kisses another girl on the mountain slope and then like doesn't tell Topanga about it, and they break up over this and everything. Like that's also her. Like, she's been in everything.
I love her.
It's so weird that like for a long time, I'm glad she's kind of found success, because for a long time she was in shows that just kept getting canceled. Freaks and Geeks, Bone Chillers. Like, it was just like, all right, cutting the axe. You get a few episodes, that's it.
the thing that's different about Bone Chillers is that it did have recurring characters, and the whole thing takes place in Edgar Allan Poe High School.
Which is great.
Way to go, Wednesday, the show, for taking that same idea. So our little cast of characters here, so we have Linda Cardellini playing as Sarah, and then there's Lexi, who's played by Sadia Prasad, who I loved her. I love Lexi's character. Like, she was like the softie and always seemed to be like concerned about everybody else and like making sure that her friends were taken care of. You have Fitz, played by John Patrick White, and then my personal favorite character was Brian, played by Esteban Powell.
Mm-hmm.
And in the, like we said, we'll get into the episode, but in the beginning of the episode, you can kind of tell that like Brian kind of has a thing for Sarah, and Linda Cardellini's character is like this. I don't know. I don't want to say frigid. That's certainly not the word, but she's this.
Well, she's kind of like she's supposed to be like the goth character, right?
Yeah,
like she's supposed to kind of be the like I don't care. She's kind of like Daria, like me.
Yeah.
Like she's kind of that type of character.
Very brooding, and
yeah.
she plays it so well. And I loved her.
And for such a weird show, the character of Brian, I think, stands out the most. He seems like the most oddball. You know who he kind of reminds me of, and as we were talking, I just thought of this. He kind of reminds me of Matthew Lillard in Scream.
Yeah.
You know, where like Matthew Lillard, you watch Scream and you're like, Scream's fun. But Matthew Lillard is like on some other level doing some weird performance that's even big for the movie that they're in.
He's the goofball. Like...
Yeah, and you're like, what is he doing half the time? But I'm enjoying it. That's kind of how I felt with this performance. And
Brian's got like big hair and he does a lot of physical comedy, which is a lot of like when you're watching Scream and you see Matthew Lillard, how he like really like gets into the facial expressions and is super loud. It's the same thing with Brian. No, the guy who plays Fitz, John Patrick White, you can clearly tell he's heavily inspired by Jim Carrey.
Oh yeah, yeah.
This character, the way he plays this is very Jim Carrey-esque, and same thing, very physical comedy, lots of like funny facial expressions, and really gets into it.
Well, and it makes me wonder if that's why Adam Rifkin was involved in this, is because he obviously was a guy who knew what to do with like a low budget. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder if because you can see if you watch like those type of like low budget movies from the 80s, it's a lot of like, let's get the performance we can out of the cheapest actors we can cast, you know, and I don't mean it as an insult to actors, you know.
No,
like,
they were
but like,
early in their careers. And,
yeah, so it's like
like
Troma's motto for Troma films is always like, if we can't get good actors, get the worst actors possible, like, because their stuff is always just so bad.
Friends, hello friends, this is Kat speaking directly to you, the people. There will be an episode about Troma. If you don't know what Troma is, and no, I'm not saying trauma like Gen Z style.
No, Troma.
Troma, you will learn.
Troma, slight, quick thing, I just want to say. And some of it hasn't aged well in terms of like technology.
Oh, none of it's aged well.
Oh, well, Troma in general hasn't. But what I was going to talk about, some of it hasn't aged well in terms of like the technology and stuff. But if you are a filmmaker out there and you want to make a movie, the best book out there to inspire you to make a movie is Make Your Own Damn Movie by Lloyd Kaufman, who is the co-founder of Troma. Again, it's dated because he talks a lot about, you know, how shooting on digital is like, you know, it was like a new thing when he was writing it. And Lloyd's very like...
But as far as the mechanics go, it doesn't really catch up. But when it comes to like budgeting and as well as general workforce and standards of workforce, it's still a good.
For years, it was the book I wrote every single year, or book I read every single year to like keep me going. Maybe I need to reread it because it's been a few years and it's like
it's I said, very inspirational.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, you have to kind of understand Troma a little bit because there's some dialogue in that book, some lines in that book, which are very much Lloyd doesn't care about who he offends, but that being said, like, I still do recommend the book because it's great. But anyway, that's kind of what this made me feel like, was like, what can we do with a little budget? How can let's hire somebody who knows what to do with very little and make the absolute best out of it that we can. Because my God, there are some establishing shots of what the school looks like, and logically it makes no sense. Like there's
and
no
I know,
reason.
like, it's only a model, but
Yeah. But that's exactly it. It's got this aesthetic, and it's this beautiful model for like, and you know it's a model, but that's part of the fun. And some of the creature designs in this episode.
The biggest note I wrote was effects and practicals are very good.
Yeah. For a show like this, and like again, this feels like a show that would have ran on Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network in the 90s because of how bizarre it is, but instead it ran on ABC, which is probably why it didn't last very long. Because this, Disney owns ABC, and this is not a Disney The first time I rewatched this episode, I will be honest, I was a little like, this is like so chaotic, it's almost hard to focus on what's going on. Like
Yeah, I agree.
I liked it a lot, but it because of, again, that aesthetic and just like the craziness. But the first time rewatching this in what, like 25, 30 years, or what, I guess it wouldn't be 30, I'm only 33, but like, in a distant amount of time, was just like, whoa, okay, like it's like not eating, sugar for a while, and then you get like the most sugary candy you can get or something.
And you're zooming.
Yeah, and you're just like, whoa, what is this? Like that's exactly it. So, anything else before we actually jump into the episode? Any other like behind the scenes stuff we want to talk about or anything like that?
The only other actor that I found who does have a pretty ongoing career, who's another favorite character of mine, is Arnie, the janitor. He's played by Charles Fleischer, who's a comedian, actor. He's been in a lot of stuff. He's still very active in industry today. One of my favorite little like side jokes that runs throughout this series is that the janitor always speaks in a different accent every time.
Yep.
So the first time you meet him, he's got this deep southern accent, and then suddenly he just starts talking like this very intense East European, almost British. It's very funny. So when you watch the show and you're kind of like, what the shit is happening right now?
Right. These
are very calculated jokes that you have to kind of stick with it to catch.
Yeah, so let's get into it. Again, this episode, if anybody, and by the way, I'll be honest, probably down the road we'll talk more Bone Chillers episodes just because we like talking about it. I don't know if anybody else is gonna care, but we enjoy talking about it. So, but if you want to follow along and you've never seen Bone Chillers and you're interested in watching it before, during, or after this episode, you can find it, like I said, all over the place. Just look up Art Intimidates Life. Again, written by Adam Rifkin, directed by Adam Rifkin as Riff Coogan. Based on the book by Betsy Haynes, this episode's not based on a book, but the book series by Betsy Haynes and apparently Daniel Weiss. So yeah, this is the first episode that aired, and it opens up on some comic pages of a comic book where it's a character named Gladiator versus
Onion Man.
Onion Man, yeah. Apparently, it ends up being like a comic book that Fitz has written seemingly alongside Brian. Like it seems like Brian has kind of added some ideas into it. They're kind of like showing it to Lexi and Sarah, and they're both kind of like unimpressed.
It does it gives you the sense of like really quickly their sense of characters where like clearly they're all four friends and they all trust each other. So you have Fitz and Brian who are like, this is our passion project. This is like our weird like little thing together and we really want to share it with you. And the girls are just kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
Because
it's a good way. Yeah, it's a good way
heads.
to like establish character. Lexi then tells Fitz and Brian that tomorrow is Sarah's birthday. They're going to throw her a surprise party. And she wants Fitz to draw like a card they can all sign, but she doesn't want any monsters on it. She wants it to...
Yeah.
Which is also odd because Sarah seems like
she's spooky.
She's hanging out in a cemetery later.
Yeah.
Like, it seems like she would be the type of person that would want a monster birthday card.
Yeah.
So I didn't quite understand why. It seemed like it should have been flipped. Like, it should have been Lexi's birthday, and, like, Sarah's like, don't draw monsters. We know Lexi doesn't, But they went with Sarah for some reason. So...
and then you introduce our bullies.
Yes.
Which is Kirk and other guy.
Kirk and friend.
Kirk and friend, yeah. And yeah, they start calling them nerds, and they rip up their comic. And this is when we get our Harbinger character.
Which, by the way, I recognized immediately who this was. Did you know who this was? He's credited as Hobo, which you would never credit somebody as today, but that's what his character is credited as, is Hobo. They call him a bum later on, which again, he probably wouldn't say, but that's Angus Scrimm. For anybody who doesn't know, Angus Scrimm is the tall man in the Phantasm series. I knew immediately from his voice. I was like, that's Angus Scrimm.
I'm watching it on the side.
Yep.
I hate this. I hate you.
So,
how did I not notice that? That's insane.
It's crazy, right? Which is great. I mean, it's great to establish. Again, this show feels like this weird thing of like, it comes from a world of like low budget, but it's on like a big budget network. Because of course, if you're doing like a low budget thing, you would get Angus Scrimm in it, like one of the king of low budget, like in a positive way. Don Coscarelli knew how to stretch, a dollar when he was making his movies. So one of the most fantastic horror movie characters of all time, you get the guy who plays that to be your intimidating sort of like harbinger of doom type of character.
Yeah. So the bullies are beating up our friends, our heroes, Fitz and Brian, and they're saying your comic's dumb, and they shred it up. And the hobo comes over. Angus Scrimm comes over.
There you go.
And Angus Scrimm is just like, oh, this is, basically consoling them, being like, what a tragedy, what a loss, kind of a thing.
He goes, I used to go to this school. Which I love. That is just like that voice, man. That he just knew how to deliver a line. R.I.P. Angus Scrimm, but yeah, man, like he just knew how to. He has so few lines in Phantasm, and he just knew how to make them memorable and make them work.
Milk it.
So after that, we move to a scene where Brian and Fitz are kind of hanging out in Fitz's place. Fitz is drawing. Brian throws a ball. We're not going to ignore that. He's drawing with a quill. Who draws with a quill? I forgot he's drawing with a quill.
He switches over to a mechanical pencil later, but he starts off with a quill.
Just because,
Why not?
Not even an ink pen, it's a quill. It's a straight up quill. So
yeah.
So he's drawing with that. I think Brian throws a ball or something. It knocks over some like gross paint water, ruins all his papers. So they have to go out and get more paper so he can draw this card. They come across this scene where they run into Angus Scrimm's character again.
And they feel laughing.
What's that?
I'm already laughing about this scene because
they give him some money because they feel bad for him, and then he goes, do you want anything in return? Like, no. And then he just like, how about a sketchbook? Which is brilliant. And the execution of this scene has to be intentional, right? Like, it has to be. The amount of lightning in this damn scene. I was like, you would never do this scene in today because of seizure warnings, flashing lights. Like, I was even like, good Lord, the amount of lightning. But that aside...
You can see it flashing on my face. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm watching the show on the side, and you can see the lightning flashing, and it's just...
constant. And I was like, this has to be intentional. It's hilarious. If it's not intentional... God, they just didn't understand the scene because
they gave a monkey with a lightning button and boom, 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 boom.
It's so funny. It happens so much, and it comes back later. We get more lightning later, but like every line, there's like flashes of lightning, and I was just like, good Lord. Later on, we see Fitz as he's drawing. He's drawing a birthday card with like a monster. It's a monster with a party hat.
Can't help himself.
Yeah. It says "Happy Birthday, Sarah." I think he's on roller skates, right?
He's got roller skates and a cake and a party hat.
Yep. And when Fitz draws it, we cut to Sarah's house or dorm room. It's unclear if they live at the school or not. I'm unclear. I don't think they do because I thought she had a line that said something about her mom. But
I think they live at home because the kids had to ride to the school, or they were riding past the school, and that's when they saw Angus Scrimm's character, and they stopped. So that I want to say that they live at home, but yeah, Sarah's laying in bed reading a book, something very emo, like Death and Other Things.
Yeah.
And I want to say she is in a full face of makeup. I'm a career goth kid, and never once did I go to bed in a full face of makeup, because I know what goes into that. Never. She opens her bedroom door because she hears a banging on her door. She opens her bedroom door, and the monster steps out on rollerblades with the cake. He's also wearing pink or purple overalls, if I remember.
Yeah.
He's wearing like these fuchsia overalls. The party hat. He's like, "Happy birthday, Sarah."
He starts chasing her around. She's terrified. And we cut back to Fitz. He's like, he remembers Lexi telling him no monsters, so he rips up the drawing. As soon as he does, the monster disappears.
Which is a really good effect.
Actually, it is. Yeah, for what it was, I was like, oh, that actually looks really cool. Like, I like the kind of, like, it almost looks like embers. Like, it kind of, like,
yeah,
burns.
like you're burning a piece of paper and the embers going up. Yeah.
Really, really cool. Like, really awesome for a low-budget thing. We come back to the school, and we see the model of the school, which, again, is, like, my favorite thing. It's so cool. I just, like, I want that model. It's really, really well done.
Sarah comes running into the school, and she sees Lexi and Brian. She's like, "Guys, you won't believe what happened to me last night. There was this monster in my bedroom." And that, they find Fitz, and they fill him in on what happened to Lexi, and he's just like,
So then Fitz goes to talk to Sarah, which is where we get more of our lightning when she tells him what happens, and he realizes, it's the drawing I did, and lightning. Which, another thing about this show that makes it feel like it's constantly going is, like, no scene is longer than, like, 30 seconds, it feels like. It's, like, constantly moving, and they have these weird...
We're SpongeBob pace. We're just...
Yeah, and we've got these transitions of, like, chattering skulls or, like, you know, skeleton hands.
Monsters ripping away the scene.
Yeah, it just constantly is like, da, 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 here's the next thing, here's the next thing, here's the next thing. So we cut to a scene after that where Brian and Fitz are in...
study hall?
In, like a classroom. And, the teacher tells them to, like, write, like, a paper on, like, an important figure or something like that. And Brian asks Fitz to borrow a piece of paper. He tells him to rip it out of the sketchbook. Brian accidentally rips 2 pieces, folds one up, puts it in his pocket, and starts writing and doodling on the other one. All of a sudden, this giant hand comes through the door, grabs the teacher as she's talking, and, like, pulls her back out. And Brian shows Fitz what he drew, and it's that exact thing. So they quickly tear it up, get rid of it, and the teacher comes back in.
Yeah, she comes stumbling back in her giant, like, beehive hairdo, like, her big ratted hairdo is all messed up and everything. She's like, "Oh, well,
just anyways."
Yeah.
Which is a fun little thing. I mean, the hand looks a little, it's not the best design, but it's a fun little thing. I think they could have done something, especially seeing what happens later on. I think they could have done something a little bit more, cool with it, but it's not too bad.
Yeah. It was definitely a practical effect that you can tell that's, like, coming in on, like, a dolly or a jib or something. But it's
some
like a
grip
giant...
is, like, out there just, like, pushing it, with, like, exactly. And again, it's not terrible. It's a cool little fun effect for what it is. But they have so many cool monsters in this episode that I almost just would have rather seen another monster. But then again, I guess it's Brian drawing it, so maybe that's the idea, is, like, he's not as good of an artist as Fitz, so... Brian and Fitz kind of figure out what's going on, and they test it by Fitz drawing this little, like, weird... Oh, you know what he kind of looks like is... Have you seen Ghoulies?
Yes.
Okay, he kind of looks like the fish ghoulie if he was more, like, skeletal. That's kind of what this creature that he draws looks like. And they're, like, waiting for something to happen, and the principal shows up and tells them to get back to class, so nothing really happens. We cut to the cook, whose name is Carl, I believe.
I love Carl.
So good.
My favorite line he ever said in the entire series was when Brian confronts him. He's like, "I can't believe you serve us this slop. This is dog food." And Carl's like, "I would never feed this to my dog. I like my dog." And I was like, I felt that in my soul. So yeah, the cook is stirring a pot or something, or he's, like, working on lunch, and then Discount Ghoulie comes out.
Which is the scene I remember. Like, when I saw that, I remember this scene being... I don't think I was scared, but it almost being so weird that it unsettled me a little bit. Even though I see it now, it's very comical. But the creature design is so bizarre. and so weird. And he's just like, they cut to this shot after he jumps out of the pot where he's running down the hall, and it's very clearly like a little like stop motion or like marionette character that they've like superimposed onto the shot of the hallway. But the way the hallway shot and the way his creature with these like weird spindly like legs is like,
he's freaky. He's so freaky. He scared the shit out of me. And he's like hunched over and his hands are up and he's like wrinkly and small and kind of shiny looking. I don't know.
He's so weird. And
weird.
He's chasing Carl, and then he starts attacking Fitz, and Fitz tells Brian to rip up the thing. They do, and he disappears. But like that scene, that might be my favorite scene in the whole episode, just for how weird and bizarre.
Oh yeah.
Even for a show like this, that it is. It definitely left an impact on some weird, back recess of my brain where it's
that
just
thing like chewing on the side of Fitz's face, and I was like, nope, I don't like it.
So then we get back-to-back scenes. One I don't understand, and one I was like, this should not be the episode.
There's these lockers, and the locker opens up into the basement, and the basement is where the janitor is, and the janitor's name is Arnie.
The scene really doesn't add anything. They go to him, and he basically tells them, yeah, it's a magic sketchbook, which by this time I think they figured out.
Yeah.
He tries to, like, bribe them into, like...
Giving him money
and stuff, and he calls himself Magnificus, and then Fitz draws a picture of him without a mouth. His mouth disappears, and then they're like, oh, I guess this book is good for something after all. But then we get to the scene. This is the only scene where I was like, this should not be in the show. This scene has not aged well at all. We go to a classroom scene. It's in, like, study hall.
Yeah.
And Fitz now knows he can do whatever he wants with the book. So he draws him kissing a girl in class. After he's done with the drawing, the girl gets up, sits in his lap, and they start making out. And the boyfriend gets up and is angry. So he quickly doodles the boyfriend Kirk, who was Kirk the bully we saw earlier. He quickly doodles him being old. He becomes like an old man. And he's like, beat it! And he throws a paper at him. And then the teacher comes over and has a line about, this is study hall, not like blah, blah, blah. And he rips up the photo.
Yeah.
The girl, like, snaps out of it. Slaps Fitz, says he's a pig, and then goes to Kirk and says, he assaulted me. And I was like, what is happening? This would not fly today. And it's honestly not funny. It wouldn't have been funny then. It's just this weird, like, Fitz is abusing his power in this weird way.
It's uncomfy.
It's uncomfy. It's uncomfy.
Yeah.
So the only thing it sets up is Kirk says that he'll pay, and he goes, oh, well, show him, and he doodles a monster or whatever to, like, come beat up Kirk for him. Yeah. Which the bell rings, and they leave beforehand or whatever. It's just not funny. It's weird.
No. And then, so whenever he goes to leave the classroom, Kirk knocks into Fitz, and Fitz drops his sketchbook and everything. It gets hidden under the trash, and the monster he drew to beat up Kirk picks up the sketchbook, and he spends the whole night, like, drawing himself up some friends, some other monster friends, and, he's, like, laughing to himself as he's drawing all these creatures.
So then we cut to the next day. Everyone's waiting on the surprise party for Sarah. Carl is scared by everybody and drops, like, the stuff he's carrying and everything, which is pretty funny. I thought his reaction was pretty good.
Yeah, he, like, walks into the lunchroom where they're having her birthday party, of all places. And so when they say happy birthday, he, like, throws all these trays everywhere.
Mm-hmm. But everybody's waiting for Sarah. All the party goers who are just the extras get bored and they leave. So Brian and Fitz separate from Lexi to go and find her. Lexi finds Sarah in a graveyard. And, like, Sarah's upset because she thinks that they forgot her birthday and everything. But they're trying to set up for what is, like, the Wiener Schnitzel Fest or something like that is the joke, I think. They keep saying, oh, it's Wiener Schnitzel Fest as, like, the joke.
Yeah.
Brian and Fitz run into Lexi and Sarah. They all go back to the room where the party's supposed to be set up. And instead of all the party goers... it's all the monsters who are there. All the monsters that this other monster has drawn. And they start attacking our cast of characters, and the cast of characters are fighting them back. And it's all like we talked about earlier. All the monster designs are really, really fun. They're really cool. They're like really well done for what they are. Low budget, creepy, kind of like fun, goofy, weird monsters. They are hiding kind of behind, I'm guessing, where the cafeteria is all set up. Brian starts writing his last will and testament, and Fitz realizes he's writing it on a piece of paper from the sketchbook, from the sketch pad that he had written, torn out earlier.
Read this.
So Fitz draws his character from his comic book Gladiator with a vacuum, and he proceeds to suck up all the monsters in the vacuum.
I want to say my favorite monster was the werewolf that had eyes going in two
Yes.
opposite directions and had two noisemakers in his mouth.
Yes.
I don't think he dropped the noisemakers, if I remember correctly. I think he just still had them in his mouth. But yeah, they all get like cartoonishly sucked up into the vacuum.
And then we have one final moment where they are outside with like a charcoal grill. They throw the book onto it and they're burning the sketchbook. But Fitz says he has one last thing. He drew a photo of all of them celebrating Sarah's birthday. Yay. And then it cuts to them. There's all kinds of balloons and like streamers, and they celebrate. They say happy birthday to Sarah.
And Sarah's like, this is a birthday.
Yep. And the episode ends. We wrap up our episode. I mean, it is a lot happening in 21 minutes or whatever.
21 minutes, and you have a lot of transitions, a lot of different characters you're introducing all at once, or not all at once, but like just very quickly.
And you've watched more. You said you've already watched the whole series again, which I have not done. Did you find that it starts to balance a little more, like, or does it? How did you feel as a whole watching the rest of it?
All this stuff falls into place over time over the series, but I can't say that every episode is like a not ADHD driven, you know.
I mean, the show has a style for sure, and I think that's, you know, part of its charm is it's like it's you know, it's not afraid to be a little weird and bonkers. And you know, I think it's weird, like if you watch the VHSs, which I think is where some people are like ripping episodes from, they do have an intro on them for like an episode intro. The ones on YouTube don't have that intro on them. It's just the episodes. But there is like an opening theme song intro, which kind of sets the tone for how bonkers and crazy and chaotic the show is going to be. It feels so not Disney or ABC. Like it does not... Stuff that hasn't aged well aside. Like the rest of the show just does not feel like something that they... I mean, think about one Saturday morning when that used to air on ABC. Like, as much as I like shows that were on there, like Recess or Pepper Ann or shows like that, this does not fit in with any of that.
It really is from left field. I think you put it well in the sense of it feels like a Nickelodeon show. It does have more of a Nickelodeon vibe to it. Mm-hmm. The only other thing I can think of that Disney did that might kind of sort of be in this vein was Don't Look Under the Bed.
Yes.
Do you remember that movie? Mm-hmm. That's the only thing I can think of that's like...
And even similar. That movie, as much as I like that movie, and it was like the first like Disney Channel original movie that was TV PG. Like it was like... But even that movie still has this Disney Channel feel to it. You know what I mean? Like it kind of still feels like it's shot like the other Disney Channel films and stuff, and it's kind of got that tone to it. This just feels like anarchy to some degree.
It does. It really does.
And there's some, from what I remember, there's some good puppetry later on in like the Franken-Turkey episodes. I think Jim Henson's company did the puppet for Franken-Turkey and stuff like that. So it's a cool little show. Like I said, I'm going to go back and watch even more episodes. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, if people like this, or even if they don't, we're going to probably talk more episodes of the show because it's just fun to talk about. But yeah, it's a bizarre little thing that seems to be doing its own thing separate from what the books were doing, and the books were kind of its own thing from Goosebumps, and it's a weird part of kids media that we really wanted to address because I think it's got a unique voice that a lot of stuff doesn't have, and it's not a lot known about it other than just it happened, it existed. There's VHSs, but it's never been put out on DVD.
Everyone has that show that they saw, or something movie that they saw when they were a kid that they swear was a fever dream and there's no way this thing exists.
Mm-hmm.
And they try and find it. And for me, that was this for the longest time. Like, I remember this.
Yeah.
There's something about it that stuck with me and that I think about now as an adult. And now that I finally found it, I'm like, it might not be the greatest piece of media that was ever made, but it's still good. It still has value. It still brings, sparks joy.
There's something fun to be, that's why people like going hunting for lost media, because there's something fun to be said about finding something that you remember and maybe a group of other people remember. When you discover that, it's like finding a treasured piece of something, even if it's not that great. I was like that for a long time. There was another ABC show and video game called Nightmare Ned that I had. It was like an animated show that I had vague memory of, and was just like, what was this weird thing, this computer video game? Again, something I totally forgot about until I rediscovered it a few years ago. I was like, that's what it was. Same with, and I did a whole, if people are interested in this, which is another thing I think, even though I've talked about it before, we should talk about it. I did a whole episode of Fright Films on Crybaby Lane, which was the Nickelodeon movie that only aired once in 2000 and just disappeared for years until people were like, I have this weird memory of this bizarre movie about twins being sawed in half and like all this weird shit. So I'm taking you've never seen Crybaby Lane. All right, Halloween this year, because it's a Halloween movie. We're going to do one of the episodes. I'm going to make a statement now. We're going to watch Crybaby Lane. So you can talk. I've talked about it before, but I think it's worth diving into again because it's so fascinating. And it honestly is one of those movies that I love because it feels like Halloween. It gets that fall feeling perfect. And not many movies do that. And so this
I'm so ready for fall.
Totally does. Same here.
Fantastic.
So yeah, be prepared for that. Be on the lookout for that. So there's a couple episodes in the future for you folks we've already talked about, but we'll do an episode on Crybaby Lane as well. But yeah, definitely check this out. If you find any of the books, check them out. Or if anybody has a collection of the books and you don't want them,
please give them to us.
Yes, please,
just
we'd love to have
that
them.
shit.
And if you want to hear us talk about more stuff like this, let us know too. Let us know in the comments.
Yeah.
Let us know on the comments on the if you listen to the audio version. Hit us up on all the socials, TikTok. Hit us up on Instagram. Wherever you can find us, let us know what you guys like and what you want to hear, and spread the word. If you like our show, tell your friends about it. I feel like that kind of wraps up this episode.
Sure does.
Why don't you close us out, Kat?
Oh, shit. How do I close this out now?
I don't know. We still haven't completely decided that.
My husband just came home. On that note, my husband's home. And I have to start being normal now.
I think that's a perfect way to close it out. So everybody, hope you enjoyed it. And until next time.
Till next time.